brought Pauper text to the party. Pauper. I brought Pauper text to the party.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 44 of the PDH Pod, the one and only Magic the Gathering podcast dedicated to the total exploration of the Pauper Commander format. I am your host, BradDracV, and let's see what one of my co-hosts from the East Coast are up to first. Dave the Alcadron Vader, how are things?
Things are going all right. I'm hanging in there. I'm so close to April vacation at my school. 2 days, two more days of work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get a break.
Nice. Just counting the minutes, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
TikTok.
Got anything planned?
Yeah, I have big plans.
Yeah?
I'm going to lay on my couch. On rare occasions, I'm going to stumble into the kitchen and make myself a sandwich. And then I'm going to return to the couch and eat my sandwich. That's it. The whole plan.
That is a hell of a plan. I love it.
Start to finish all week long. This couch is where I live now.
All right. Well, our resident PDH PhD Liam is off for a couple weeks to do some nuptial globe trotting. So for this episode, we brought in a good friend of the show and a prolific deck builder, Paul, a.k.a. Scarecrow, has agreed to fill in for Liam in his absence, at least for this week. Scarecrow, thanks for coming on. What have you been up to since we last saw you, or last talked to you? What was it, around Halloween time,
Yep.
I think?
I've been doing a little bit of travel. Just got back this past week from a road trip. Drove like 2,000 miles to go see some redwood trees. That was fun. And I'm in the middle.
Yeah, and you saw a fellow PDHer along the way.
Yeah, I got to stop in and pay Chev a visit and meet him for the first time. So that was pretty
that's
cool.
awesome.
Played a few 1v1 games that were hilariously bad because they were with decks that were made for 4-person games.
Right.
And yeah, starting a new job, doing a lot of training, feeling useless. So it's good to be here and feel less useless, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you are always very productive here, regardless of the real world. Well, good. Sounds good. Happy to have you on. So, we got to do some housekeeping before we get to the main topic here. As usual, if you like the show and like what we're doing, check us out over on Patreon. Pretty much everywhere I'm getting ready to mention, we are just the PDH Pod over on Patreon. And by signing up there, by giving us a little pledge, you get access to the pre-show every week, which is roughly about the same as getting a bonus episode just about every single week. You get access to the Discord, where you can hang out, chat with us, get help with your deck, see cute dog pictures, all that sort of stuff. So that's really cool to hang out there, chat with everybody. And then you get access to the show notes. I post those along with the pre-show, usually the night before the episode actually goes live. And then check us out over on YouTube, the PDH Pod there, and then my Saturday streams over on Twitch at, you guessed it, the PDH Pod. That's it for housekeeping. Liam, what do we got for this week in Magic?
I am not Liam, and also, I don't ever pay attention to Magic news, so I have very
little. This is
little.
going to be awesome.
But there's one piece of information that I would like to share with you. It's less about the game of Magic and more about celebrity gossip. It is
yes, all right.
Everyone's favorite Magic celebrity, the one person that you all think of immediately and fondly with love in your hearts as soon as someone says Magic personality. Liam got married.
Woo!
He is honeymooning as we speak.
As we record this episode.
I have every expectation of all of our European listeners to see if you can spot him and send me pictures.
Yeah. Where's Liam? Play the game.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, that's This Week in Magic. I don't know what else is happening.
I think that should trump everything,
yeah,
I think.
It's it seems like the most important thing that I've heard about.
Oh, yeah, hands down, easily. Congrats, Liam. We love you.
I'm super happy for you, bud.
I'm just imagining all the people that are looking for the Strixhaven Scholar that he has as his Twitter image.
Right. His name is Ulf, and he's not Strixhavenian, he's Talarian.
That's right, because it was the Return to Dominaria whenever they were doing timey-wimey stuff.
I think Liam said they were flying to Ireland as we were, like, this week, and then something else next week. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I think...
I'm a bad co-host.
I remember the word Ireland happened at some point. I don't remember what else was going on.
That definitely came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Ireland and airplanes and cannot record.
So here's the real test. We will we will find out exactly what his plan was when he listens to this and then yells at us on Discord about it.
See? And if you get in the Discord, you can watch Liam yell at us.
This is going to be the test. Is he going to listen to the episode on his honeymoon? Find out with us.
Sorry, honey. Give me an hour and a half or so. I got some content to absorb.
I got to know whether or not they're talking about me. We are.
BRB.
We are talking about you.
Yes, we are.
Let's be honest.
Because we miss you.
He won't assume it's just 90 minutes.
That's true.
That's fair.
Good call.
Yeah.
He knows by now. He too has fallen down rabbit holes. With the best of them. Oh, all right. Let's climb out of the Liam rabbit hole to actually get to the main topic. What do you think?
I'm excited about this topic. Tell me about the main topic.
Yeah. I am too. Well, deck building with Signpost uncommons from March of the Machines. That's what we're talking about. This episode comes from our wonderful listeners. We recently got a suggestion from 2 different people, I believe, that we should do a deck building episode based on some Signpost uncommons from new sets. Like maybe even the order. Like last week we did our set review, and then this week we're building decks around a handful of those Signpost uncommons. So things like that, I thought it was an excellent idea. For those of you that may not know, Signpost uncommons are typically gold cards, usually 2 colors, and to boil it down, they just point you in the direction of what that color pair should be doing in your limited draft. Or yeah, I guess that's really about it. I don't know. I've never done a sealed draft, so I don't know if signposts come in handy during sealed events or not. But draft for sure. Each draftable set has mechanics to build around, and these Signpost uncommons are an excellent way to build your deck, to build a very playable, sometimes really good deck, and take down your shop's little draft or an arena draft or something like that. The basic idea in this episode is to take what would be, if you made a very cool limited deck, take that deck and build it into a full-fledged Pauper Commander list. With our March of the Machines set review in the books, we felt like this was a good time to do this sort of inaugural episode on this topic. So there are a ton of decent options in this set. It's a very exciting set and a lot of really cool mechanics and abilities to build around. So I'm pretty excited to get into this. But Dave, I can actually hear the people yelling in the background. Isn't this the same as a 3x3 episode?
I'm glad, yelling people in the background, that you have asked, because this is a very topical question that I wanted to talk about. The answer is a little bit, but not really.
Right.
With a 3x3, we're trying to really dive down into the center of what makes an archetype functional. Like what the archetype is trying to do. How is this archetype going to win? What does a Voltron deck need to put together in order to be a threat? What does an Aristocrats deck need to do to win the game? And then we're going to kind of compare and contrast how different commanders achieve that thing.
Yep.
We don't have any real commonalities here. With the Signpost thing, we're not just going to take an archetype and see how different commanders do it. We're each going to be talking about a completely different archetype. The only unifying characteristic is that they all come from the same set.
Pretty much. Kind of like if I were to go to my shop and draft Mom, and I was like, oh, this commander would make a cool deck. Let me see what I can build when I get home. That's kind of what this episode is.
Exactly. Yeah, when Derek was hanging out with Shivam on his show, this was something that got mentioned there a lot. Like, one of the big appeals of PDH is, build your favorite draft decks in Constructed in a format where your draft archetype isn't just catastrophically blown out and overpowered by someone else's carefully constructed 100 card EDH nonsense deck or whatever.
Yeah, that was a good episode. I like that analogy quite a bit.
Yeah, so that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to see, let's pretend that the three of us have just drafted Mother of Machines, and we each came away with a different deck that we really enjoyed, and we noticed that within these decks there were uncommon creatures that really drove the entire functionality of the deck forward, and we decided, I wish I could make this card into a PDH commander. How am I going to do that?
Yep.
So we're gonna,
and kind of like you stated too, like the decks that we're going to present aren't at all the only way to build these decks.
Yeah.
It's not a 3x3. It's not saying, oh, this commander is only good in this deck, so just net deck what I put up there and run it out there. No, this is just personally what I would do with my commander.
Yeah. So things that we have decided would be fun for our specific commanders are one of the things that we're going to talk about. Before that, we're going to talk a little bit about what your draft deck might look like. So we really are trying to connect this to the limited environment. I hope all of you are limited, because limited is amazing, and limited Mother Machines looks outstanding.
Yeah, so it looks very, very good.
If you do want to try and draft this deck, what would that look like? What cards from Mother Machines should you be looking for to add to your draft deck to make this a really powerful 40-card limited powerhouse? Yeah. And then what different directions could you take this if you made it into a PDH deck?
Yep. I think that was an excellent explanation. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
All right, honorable guest Scarecrow, do you want to start off the listeners with what mom signpost you picked and why? Is that how we're jumping into it?
Sure, I can do that. So I went with the Azorius uncommon creature, Marshal of Zhalfir, or I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it is a 2-drop, 2/2 for a white and a blue, and it is a human knight. Other knights you control get +1/+1, and it has an activated ability for a white, a blue, and tapping your marshal, you can tap down another target creature. So I picked this because it is reminiscent of some very favorite pet cards of mine that are creatures that when they attack, they tap target creature. So those have an offensive element and a survival element where you get rid of a blocker and you're still able to attack with the same creature. This commander does something similar. It gives you something offensive, buffing all your other knights, and something that can get rid of blockers or stop something else from attacking you. So it's something I love, but more flexible. And what I really tried to do was lean into that flexibility to where it's a kind of decentralized deck, and looking at it, it can feel kind of good stuffy, and it ends up being a little bit like a dirtily defensive mid-range deck, but because of the commander's contributions and how you can focus on different aspects of your deck at different times, it makes the whole very flexible and capable in a way that can be kind of hard to do in PDH. Like, I try constantly to make dirtily mid-range decks, and a lot of them fail. This one does pretty well.
You and me both. Yeah, and surprisingly, we've got a handful of knights that aren't just vanilla. Like, we got some pretty cool knights that have some cool stuff on them.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you want me to go more into the way the deck functions, or are we saving that for later?
Let's hop over to Dave and see what you picked and why.
If anyone is guessing about what Dave picked, and you are guessing the Berserk tier aggro option that is red and black Aristocrat Voltron with Stormclaw Rager, then you guessed correctly, and I
ding 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 ding. You are the winner.
It's true. I love red and black. I love turning cards sideways. I love attacking. I love sacrificing things for value. So I'm just a huge fan of all the things this deck does. Stormclaw Rager is a 3-mana 2/2 ogre warrior with exactly one ability, and that ability is at sorcery speed, which is a huge bummer, but we'll talk about that later. At sorcery speed, for 1 mana, sacrifice another creature or artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Stormclaw Rager, and draw a card. This is a carrion feeder on methamphetamine.
That can also sack treasures.
You can...
Yeah.
Do you guys understand how good clues are when clues cost half as much and there are 40 cards that just make them constantly? Oh my god.
Seems good.
This sacrifices treasures. So many treasures. Yeah, I'm going to later in the show notes. We're not quite there yet, but later in the show notes there is an entire rant about the card Big Score, which you can look forward to soon. For now, remain seated. Let's hear what Brad's bringing us.
I got the easy one. I got Is It. But unfortunately, the blue and red archetype for March of the Machines Limited is actually Convoke, but we don't have a lot of Convoke at common in those colors. I think we have 6 with mana pips and 2 that are colorless, something like that.
I just realized that you brought the Yargle to the not a 3x3.
I think I did.
Really? I felt like being the only non-red person, I was the Yargle.
No, we both brought Signpost uncommons to the Signpost uncommon.
Yeah, you kind of did. Yeah.
I think Brad is the odd one out here.
I got the probably the easiest deck to build, but it's not Signpost at all because we just don't have much Convoke going on. Even though Mom brought us a bunch of Convoke, it still didn't give us enough to build a whole deck around it, especially at the 100 card level. So I just took the Is It Blitz approach, and this deck literally is just going to care about triggering the double prowess and swinging for huge amounts of damage. It is super straightforward, and that's all I got. I can't add any more words to that sentence.
Is it pretty simple?
It is super simple. Yep, 100% simple. There's no tricks. There's nothing crazy. No fancy combos. No nothing. Just casting spells, drawing cards, and win or lose. It's going to be over quick.
What's wild about this card is that I've played many times against Wee Dragonauts.
Mm-hmm.
And Wee Dragonauts is like really powerful, and it does half of what this card does.
Yeah, I've also I've tried Mercurial Geists before, and it's very much in the same boat as Dragonauts.
Yeah, I totally skipped past that. But for those of you that didn't listen to last week's set review episode, shame on you first. But second, I chose Kenra Spell Spear. It's a generic and a red for a 2/2 trample prowess. And for 3 generic and a Phyrexian blue, you can transform it into Gitaxian Spellstalker. It's a 3/3 with trample, ward 2, prowess, and prowess. And it's a Phyrexian Jackal. So that's it. So I could add some more words to my sentence, but it was the card itself.
Double prowess.
Double prowess.
Double prowess on something that has trample and ward.
I want to say they've spelled out double prowess before in the past, haven't they?
There was an Azorius dragon that had spelled out double prowess, I think, but it might not have triggered on certain spells. Or maybe it did.
Sounds familiar.
Some kind of sky dancer, something. The Azorius dragon on Signpost uncommon from the Khan's block, whatever. Fate Forged.
I'll find it in a minute.
Let me see if I can find it.
Sure.
It's a race.
Yeah, I feel like I have seen
Cunning Breeze Dancer. Whenever you cast one creature's spell, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn, 4/4 with flying for 6. And it is from Dragons of Tarkir. Yep.
Yeah. That's so they have spelled out prowess before. Although, in fairness, the difference between this and prowess is that if you want to stop Cunning Breeze Dancer from getting bigger, you only have to spend 1 Mirror Shell Crab.
Right.
If you want to stop the Jackal from getting bigger, you need to spend 2.
Yeah, because that is separate triggers.
Yep. It's 2 separate triggers. You have to counter them separately.
Counter them separately, exactly. Yep. On top of any ward shenanigans you may have to pay.
I really love the casual sprinkling of ward in every set now. I
do too.
Really
I'm a fan of it. Mm-hmm.
I love that it's happening, but every time it happens, I just get really bitter that it didn't happen 2 months earlier, because I'm still mad about Essior. So angry.
Because of those abilities.
Because I just get routinely blown out by Aether Spellbombs and Executioner's Capsules and Oubliettes.
And occasionally a Steam Scourger.
That hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure it will.
Ooh, I haven't seen that one in a hot minute.
The occasional red bounce spell.
Uh-huh.
The Aether Spellbomb is a lot more of a threat than the Steam Scourger, because there's a lot of ways I can give Essior Pro red, but it's very difficult to give Essior Pro Aether Spellbomb.
Oh, yeah.
So, Dave, we don't.
Yes.
Well, we kind of, sort of do and don't have pillars for this episode. But how are we structuring this here deck dive?
I would love to tell you about how I've envisioned this to be structured. I think we should start out with the draft archetype that you're hopefully going to try to build this commander for. So if you're drafting Mother of Machines, you see this card and you think, that's what I want to do with my draft. What else are you going to take? How are you going to enable that? What cards are you going to put together to try and make a functional draft deck? And that's going to get us talking about the themes of the cards and thinking about what they're good with and how they're going to perform. And so after we have done that, I propose that we move into what do we want to do with these cards outside of the context of Mother of Machines, March of Machines.
March of Machines.
So we're going to think about from the entirety of Magic's history, how are we going to find cards that are going to come in and help this deck do what it wants to do. And yeah, as always, Pillar 3 is how to not run out of gas, and Pillar 4 is how to not die.
We can't avoid them. They're too important.
They're everywhere. They're ubiquitous.
They are.
No getting away from those guys.
They have to be, yeah. Excellent. All right, first up is the, as you mentioned, the elements of Mom that support this archetype. Scarecrow, what do you got?
Sorry, starting from a draft perspective, normally Knights aren't that aggressively statted. You'll occasionally hit like a 3-1 for 2, but they generally, when I've seen aggro in draft, it's been more so about tokens, and Knights don't really do that until you get up to the 4 or 5 mana realm. So they aren't usually what you think of in terms of aggressive archetypes in draft. So to me, one of the really intriguing ideas here is using Marshall in draft to make Knights more aggressive. For example, that 3-1 is now a 4-2, and maybe it gets an extra swing in before it trades away, and that's a big chunk of life in a 20-life format. And then on top of that, once you start to reach the turn 5, 6, 7 area, maybe you're just a little bit short on damage, and that being able to tap down a blocker is what lets your aggro deck finish off that mid-range person that was about to stabilize. So being a little more aggressive than you usually see this tribe being is what I would find intriguing about Marshall in draft.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of like what you said. If I would have seen this in any other limited environment, I would have passed it by, but for some reason it feels more intriguing in this set.
Yep.
I feel like there's more to it in Mom this time around.
And that's all I had. Just very straightforward. It's a 2-drop Anthem. It's aggro.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that. And you're in the colors too. If you need to slow it down, you can. If you need to slow the game down, if you need to gain life, you can do that sort of thing.
Yep.
Dave, you want to go next?
I would love to go next. I'm actually really excited about Stormclaw Rager in limited in draft because of the way it interacts with the incubate mechanic.
Yeah.
And the way it interacts with the backup mechanic. Like, I feel like if you look at the list of, the Wizards kind of publishes this list of like, here's each of the 2 color combinations, and here's like the basic sort of plan that each color pair is going for. Like, this deck has its fingers in like 3 of these plans. It's going to do sacrifice things, it's going to do backup things with +1/+1 counters, and it's going to do it's going to take advantage of the incubate mechanic really well. So if you see cards like Ichor Drinker, which is a 1-mana body that you can then sacrifice. My wife is telling me that it's pronounced Ichor. If you see an Ichor Drinker, which is a 1-mana body that then after it dies, you can exile it from your graveyard for another 1 mana to create an artifact. Like, this is just 2 things you can sacrifice to your Stormclaw Rager and draw cards off of each of them, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, it's feasible to do that in a single turn.
Yeah.
Like in an early turn. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just drawing cards and growing a big threat for, like, without spending a lot of cards to do it. That seems big. Yeah. We have a couple other sack outlets in the form of things like Aki's Scrap Chomper and Dreg Recycler. These will take down your opponent's life total and draw you cards. There's a couple powerful like death triggers. Things like Etched Familiar has a really cool death trigger. It's also just sort of like a really aggro threat if you're making your deck really aggressive.
Yeah.
Gift of Completion is an enchantment that triggers anytime Phyrexian dies, I think.
Yeah. When it's Phyrexian you control dies, you surveil.
Yeah. So having something like that just makes sure that the cards you're drawing from the Rager are really good cards. Like, that's powerful. There's also a threaten effect. There's a brand new threaten card in the set called Furnace Rains. It's at uncommon, so you won't be able to put it into a PDH deck, but you can steal other people's creatures and then sacrifice them.
Right.
With how much draft
I like doing that.
With how much draft can come down to bombs like that, being able to steal a bomb, whether you sacrifice it or not, seems massive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I love threaten effects in drafts. I think they're criminally undervalued.
Yeah, that's I think WotC does too. That's kind of why they're in every single set now.
Yeah.
I like them. I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah. Tell us
Cool.
about the Spell Spear.
Yeah, the Spell Spear, like I said, not a signpost, but I feel like this is just going to be crazy fun in the limited environment. We don't have a ton of Convoke spells in Izzet Colors at common. Like I said earlier, there's like 8 total, 2 of them being colorless / artifacts. One of them came from this set, so I decided to pick the next best thing that Izzet does, and that is, cast spells. More of a blitz package. The Spell Spear cares about spells for its prowess, and then just beating face. Like I mentioned earlier, when I first started to build a deck for this commander, I thought I wanted to get cute with it, like infinite combo lines, massive token strategies, yada yada yada. But that's not what's printed on the card. The Spell Spear tells you what it wants to do. It wants to get bigger and it wants to get aggressive. It's got trample and double prowess. That's huge. So then I started looking through the set, the mom set. Obviously, I'm not going to deep dive super into mythics and rares and all that stuff. But there is a ton of stuff at the uncommon level that will absolutely pump this guy up, get him through for damage. Like Omen Hawker, for example, is a uncommon single drop. It's a 1/1 for a single blue mana. You can tap it to add a colorless and a blue, and you can spend that mana to activate or only spend the mana to activate abilities. Well, that covers like half of his transform cost right there. Things like that. There's Lithomantic Barrage. It's a spell that can't be countered that does damage. There's Stoke the Flames, which is part of that Convoke archetype. There's just a crazy amount of really good spells and creatures at the uncommon level and above for either the Convoke Signpost, the actual Signpost creature for the Convoke mechanic, or for the Spell Spear. Either one, because I think they're going to sort of play really well together, because a lot of the Convoke spells in MOM are non-creature spells. There's a handful that are creatures, but there's a bunch that are non-creatures, and that's exactly what the Spell Spear loves. So I feel like if you are going to draft the actual Signpost uncommon, you're not going to pass up a Spell Spear, because they're going to go hand in hand in the deck. So there isn't too much that you need to do here. You don't have to get fancy. Just cast cheap spells, protect the Spell Spear as much as you can, and just do a lot of damage. I'm a huge fan. I think we touched on it quite a bit, or talked really well about Saba Cryptomancer, the 2-mana 0/1 flash with backup 1, gives hexproof. Like, that is huge in a deck like this, because Spell Spear is going to be one of those commanders that hits the table with a gigantic target on its back. So you need to protect it as much as possible. I added in, you're going to have things like Ren's Resolve, which is basically just a functional Reckless Impulse, that sort of thing. So you're going to have a lot of really brand new commons that are just going to be awesome in your limited deck, and you can definitely expand those out into a full-fledged 100-card PDH deck, if you will. Because I used to, when I'd go to the LGS and play Pauper events on Saturdays, like, if I just wanted to be more social and have my matches last 15 minutes so I could just hang out with everybody in between rounds, I would play Izzet Blitz, because they are over that fast. Win or lose, like, your whole match is done in 15 or 20 minutes, and you have an hour or an hour and a half to just hang out, look at cards, talk to people, all that sort of stuff. So it's a very explosive mechanic or archetype strategy, whatever you want to call it. It's a very fun strategy. So I'm pretty excited about this. I think I'm actually, like, when we talked about doing this episode, I was thinking, okay, I'll build a deck for the episode. We'll talk about it. I'll put it on Moxfield in the show notes, yada, yada, yada. But the more I think about it and talk about it and look at it, I think I'm actually going to build it in paper and just have a really fun Izzet Blitz PDH deck. That's my plan.
Seems like a good plan.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite archetypes. Heroic and Blitz style Izzet decks. I love them. And that's one reason I love Iconoclast so much. I know there's a lot of CPDH builds for third path Iconoclast that are probably leagues better than my deck, but I just sort of built it as a blitz style deck that focuses on the whole board of creatures rather than like a Kiln Fiend or a Festival Crasher, that sort of thing. So they're very similar commanders, but this one I want to go more focused on the commander, getting him through for massive damage, and just let the rest of the board ping their way to victory, if you will. What do we have for step 2?
Step 2 is going to be how we're going to take these ideas out of the context of March of the Machines and into the context of the entirety of commons from Magic's history to see what kind of cool, interesting shenanigans we can get up to by building a deck. Like, say, for example, if your commander sacrificed artifacts to draw cards, you might be interested in something like, I don't know, Big Score.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
Which makes treasure tokens.
Look at that. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah. I would love to hear Paul's plan.
So one of the things you'll notice if you go back through Knights over the course of Magic history is they love keywords. It's a veritable soup out there. Mm-hmm. So they tend to be things like First Strike, Vigilance, sometimes Lifelink, and those keywords are very much amplified when you just give them a little bump. Like, the difference between gaining 2 life a turn and 3 life a turn over 3 combats turns out to be a pretty good amount. And stepping up a Vigilance creature means you probably attack with it twice as much because you aren't quite as much at risk when you poke into a larger board state, and you can take a bigger creature too. And with First Strike, suddenly you can be so much more powerful in the defensive, just 1 more point of First Strike damage. So all of these things have this
think about how many more creatures a 3-powered First Striker can take out than a 2-powered First Striker.
Yep.
Like, so combining
the Anthem with all of these keywords ends up feeling like the total is more than the sum of its parts. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great commons that kind of emphasize that. With newer stuff like Kithkin Billy Rider, the 1/3 double strike knight for 3 that you all talked about in your set review last week, or going all the way back to Ravnica, we've got things like Liev Sky Knight. That's a 3/1 with flying, and then it detains something when it enters the battlefield for 3. So you have a lot of offensive power with something that's also defensive.
Yeah.
And then also from Ravnica, you get things like Azorius Knight Arbiter. That's a 2/5 for 5 with Vigilance, and it can't be blocked, and it's a knight. So that's suddenly 3 unblockable damage every turn and a 6 butt on defense.
That seems good.
The amount of continued value that you get from that is just astronomical. So I'm very much leaning on the keyword soup style of cobbling things together, and just combining that with the Anthem effect to get consistent damage over time, as well as a stronger defense.
That is a solid plan. I like it.
And that's all I've got.
I like it.
Dave, how are you using the entirety of Magic's history for the Rager?
Do y'all know about a card called Chromatic Star?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. I've heard of that. I've played it a couple times. It's good.
It's pretty good. Legend has it that it has an activated ability that does something about mana filtering, but I don't care. It is a 1 mana artifact that includes the text, when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card, which means
that works really well with your commander. Huh.
It really does. For 1 mana, you can play this artifact, and then for 1 mana, you can sacrifice it to the Battle Rager, the Stormclaw Rager, and then you draw 2 cards. This is just better than Divination in a red-black aggro aristocrats deck.
Yep. Seems good.
And there are like 12 of them.
Yeah, we have a ton
Terrarium,
of them. It is awesome.
Panic Spellbomb, Nihil Spellbomb, Ichor Wellspring, Ichor Wellspring, I guess. I don't know. Mycosynth Wellspring. Prize Statue doesn't draw you a card when it goes down. It just makes another treasure.
Yeah.
Crazy. Prize Statue is a 2 mana, makes a treasure when it comes in, makes a treasure when it dies. So 2 mana to cast this thing, plus the 3 mana it takes to sacrifice all 3 of those artifacts. That's 5 mana for draw 3 cards, put 3 counters on your commander.
Yeah.
Nimblewright schematic is the same. Implement of Combustion, Implement of Malice, both of these things draw you a card when they die. Dusk Legion Zealot, Guildsworn Prowler, Novice Occultist. These are all creatures.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I have become a huge fan of Guildsworn Prowler.
Guildsworn Prowler is nuts.
So good. And it's only been in like the last 3 or 4 weeks. I guess I've just largely ignored it for the last almost year.
It's a really good card. And like, I love in this deck, it's a pivot card in this deck. It can be an aggressive thing that you use to attack because it's a 2-power Death Toucher for really cheap. It can be a blocker. If you resign yourself to not needing to draw a card off its death, you just sit there and block with it because it's a Death Toucher.
Right, exactly.
If you need a card off it, or if you need 2 cards off it, you just sacrifice it to your Rager, and now you have put a counter on your guy and drawn 2 cards.
Yeah, because you get to draw if it wasn't blocking. So if it's just sitting there, or it's at the end of your combat and it was attacking, you're like, oh, I need some cards. Let me go ahead and sacrifice it real quick.
The tragic thing is you cannot sacrifice it in combat at all, because the sacrifice ability is only sorcery speed.
Sorcery speed, correct.
You can sacrifice it during main phase 2 after it is attacked.
There you go. That works.
So yeah, just the number of cards. I went through and I tagged the cards that draw either when they die or when they come into play. Just the number of cards in my build of this list that'll just draw you an extra card off of being sacrificed to the Storm Rager is 29.
Whoa.
I really hadn't thought of the similarities between this and Garna previously, but that really draws attention to it.
Yeah, like not all 29 of them are good. Like some of them are like Wedding Invitation, which isn't bad. I mean,
it's not terrible.
Yeah, it's the floor of Wedding Invitation here is just a divination. You 2 mana to cast it, draw a card off ETB, 1 mana to sacrifice it, you draw your second card for 3 total mana. Or you could use it to make your guy unblockable. Or something like...
If you need those final points of life, or whatever, combat.
Yeah. Sleeper Dart is similar. It's a 2 mana artifact. You draw a card on ETB. You can spend a mana to sacrifice it for another card. That's what it's in the deck for. It's just a divination that puts a counter on your guy. Mm-hmm. Or you could tap and sacrifice it to make target creature not untap. Not great. But
not great.
I mean, it's going to keep your hand full, which is pretty important. I think this Storm Rager is going to die all the time. I think she's just going to get murked constantly. I think you're going to sacrifice 3 things, and someone's just going to blast her, and you're going to be like, that's fine. I will recast her, and I will sacrifice 3 more things. So you need to keep... This isn't the thing where you like empty your hand on all the stuff. This is the thing where you keep your hand full with terrible cards like Sleeper Dart. Because Sleeper Dart is divination that puts a counter on your guy. So yeah, that's 29 cards in my deck. Another 23 are things that make treasures repeatedly.
Oh, that is a lot of treasures.
Sticky Fingers makes a treasure every time the thing connects. Beamtown Beatstick makes a treasure every time the thing connects. Some of them aren't treasures. Hoarding Ogres, lots of treasures. Honestly, I think...
And the treasures are good here, too, because like you said, the Rager's going to die a lot, so you could use that to recast her. If she's on the board, you can just draw cards.
Yeah. Yeah, so something like Unexpected Windfall is going to, it's card draw by itself, and it creates 2 treasure tokens. Mm-hmm. And if you sacrifice both of those to the Rager, you're just drawing 4 cards off of your Unexpected Windfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also got a couple of these cards make blood tokens. Things like...
that's spicy. I like that.
Yeah, the Ceremonial Knife makes a blood token every turn. Vampire's Kiss just makes 2 blood tokens, like for free.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're expecting your commander to die a lot, are you equipping the token-making equipment to your commander or to other creatures?
Whatever you think's going to get through.
And I love that you're so focused on combat. Like Ceremonial Knife is, it makes a blood token on combat damage.
Yeah.
But you're just like, it makes a blood every turn.
Exactly. I know only war. I don't understand not attacking with things. You put the axe on the body and then you send it to someone's head. Like that's how you play Magic.
That's how you swing an axe.
Casting spells, I don't understand.
Yep.
Yeah, that's like pretty much the entire deck. There's a couple other people, like there's a couple ways to give her trample. There's a couple ways to give her double strike.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's the entire deck.
Hey, I feel you. The Spell Spear deck is really straightforward. One of the things I love about this episode, this topic, these commanders we picked, future episodes where we do this sort of same thing with new sets, is they're all super, I don't want to say linear, but they're all very, they're doing, even in PDH, they're doing what a Signpost uncommon should do. They're directing you on how they want your deck built, basically. And it's super fun. It's a really cool exercise. It's a super cool idea. So, anyway, my Spell Spear deck is literally straightforward. By the time you get done listening to this episode, you're probably going to be tired of hearing the word "is it blitz" or "blitz," but it is just that. We want all the cheap spells. We want all the combat tricks, double striking stuff, that sort of thing. We want as much unblockable as possible. Like Artful Dodge is one of my favorite ones. It's sorcery. Target creature is unblockable with flashback for a single blue.
Yeah.
It's so good here.
There's a rebound one too, right?
Yeah, that's in the deck. It is. I just blanked on it because it's in that Jeskai deck that you and Liam and Brownie made for me. Distortion Strike.
Yeah, that's it. In some very minor ways, I like the rebound a tiny bit less because it's so choreographed. Like when
it's just sitting there, like everyone's looking at it.
Right. Like the first time you cast it, it's a surprise, and you're like, you just point at someone and you're like, you out of the game, you're dead. And then it just sits on top of your library and the other two players are staring at it being like, hold up. Like,
wait a second.
I know what happens next turn. And then there's no plausible deniability for like whether or not you get just beaten up and thrown in the garbage can. Like, it's coming.
Well, there is the political aspect of, oh, don't worry, I'm just going to kill Bob, not you.
Yeah. You can try to get away with that, but
the first time I played that Jeskai Prowess deck, I played with, I can't remember the full pod, but I know Abby was there, and I had cast Distortion Strike, like full retail or whatever, and it went in exile, put it on top of my library, and then the next player went, and I think I was player 2, Abby was player 1, and like halfway through her turn, she started asking, who's that Distortion Strike going to hit? Where's that going? What creature are you going to cast that on?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. It is very, very telegraphed. But it is so good because you get the second casting for free. So right there, it gives +1/+0 and unblockable. So it'll be a 6/5 unblockable for free. I mean, that seems good.
Casually, no big deal.
Casually, right.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I mean, it literally is. We're just trying to go cheap. We're trying to go fast, and we're trying to do.
Hold up. That card by itself is the 6/5.
Yes.
So then, Assault Strobe is the 8-power double strike. That's it. That's all you need.
That's death. I mean, that is death. So yeah, assuming figure out how fast you can get this sucker transformed, and you might kill someone the next turn, or that turn if you have a haste enabler.
That is savage.
It is super savage. I hadn't even figured that out when I was building this deck. I was like, okay, what kind of combat tricks do I need for lethal on one swing? Yada yada yada. But that's it. I mean, that's 2 spells, and one of them was free.
Yeah. So
crazy.
The transforming it doesn't like trigger summoning sickness. You don't need to give it haste when you transform it.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yep, yeah, you're right. Good call. I don't play with a lot of transform cards, except for Is It Blitz.
Is the backside considered a multicolored creature? The backside is both red and blue, right?
Yeah, its color identity is red and blue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's
thinking of
yes, Psychotic Fury.
Yes, Psychotic Fury.
I was counting the number of double strike spells we have at common, and we are currently sitting at 5. Assault Strobe, Psychotic Fury, Raking Claws, Timber Battle Rage, Uncaged Fury.
Yeah, Psychotic Fury's in here. Gives the target multicolored creature double strike till the end of turn, and you draw a card. Yep. Okay. That's fine.
Seems pretty good.
Seems
good. Pretty decent chances that you Assault Strobe and kill someone with your Distortion Strike one turn, and then there's a non-zero chance you have another double strike card in your hand for next turn.
Yeah, but to enable this stuff to sort of dig through Magic's history to support this archetype, I went with like Artful Dodge and Distortion Strike. Obviously, the classics that you'll find in every Blitz list is Preordain and Ponder. Cheap ways to trigger prowess, to dig through your deck, to draw you cards. I even went back to Ice Age, or 5th edition if you like, for Imposing Visage. Just a single mana red enchantment that gives creature menace.
I love the art on that card.
I do too. It's wild. Because I was looking for a way to give menace without investing completely into like a Goblin War Drums, which can be 3 mana, etc., etc. I know there's equipment in that, but I wanted something that at least, I don't know, seemed cool, and this seems cool. So Imposing Visage is in there. Teamer Battle Rage, it wouldn't be a Blitz list without Teamer Battle Rage, basically. And then kind of the whole supporting cast around the commander. Kiln Fiend, Thermo Alchemist, Kessig Flame Breather, Festival Crasher. I haven't decided if I want to go the full-on like Nivik Cyclops and all that sort of stuff, but those 3 are for sure are going to be in there. And what I love about those, not only do they get huge when you cast spells, just like your commander, but they are also targets for removal, hopefully to take away from your commander. I mean, if they're wise, they're probably just killing your commander anyway, but I don't know. I'm a fan of them. It's not it's not infeasible. I don't know if that's a word. It's not infeasible to swing for, with Kiln Fiend and your commander and Festival Crasher to swing for like 30 or 40 in a turn, given Double Strike and Trample and all these spells you're casting and stuff. And I threw in Gut Shot for free, that sort of thing. Just the cheapest I could possibly make spells, they are in here. Like if I scroll down, the deck's total mana value is 143 off.
That's
66 cards, I think.
Yeah,
not counting lands.
It's like just a hair over 2, right?
Yeah, 2.2. It's not terrible, I don't think.
That's really low to the ground. It's good.
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to do. I went deep with like Crimson Wisp, which is just a red mana target creature becomes red and gains haste, draw a card. Like,
did you did you cut lands based on the Xerox idea? Like for every 3 or 4 cantrips you have, that are like 1 or 2 mana, you can cut a land, because even if you have a low land hand, you can use your cantrips to dig for them.
I am aware of that theory, and I used to do that quite a bit for my 60-card Pauper decks because I understood that math a little better. I don't know how that translates to PDH, but I am open to that option, absolutely.
If I remember correctly, the rule of thumb was every 3 cantrips you get rid of a land in 60-card formats, and when I occasionally make use of it in Pauper Commander, I've been doing it a little more conservatively. I've been doing it like at a 4-to-1 ratio, and then I only end up cutting like probably 3 lands at most. So it never gets nearly as extreme as you see in 60 card, but it still can help you a little bit, I think.
Well, I did it earlier, if I use the highlighter and I type in the Oracle text draw, it comes up with 23 options. So I have 23 cards on my deck that say draw a card on them, or at least draw 1 card. So yeah, that might actually help, because I am definitely open to that option. I like doing that in 60-card Pauper. But yeah, I think it's something to try out. Right now, my deck's at 35 lands because I just started with that and filled in the rest. But yeah, I would be okay with going down to 33, 34, 32, somewhere in that range.
34 sounds like a good place to start testing it, because like when I'm thinking 4-to-1 cut a land, I'm also thinking starting point of 37. So.
Oh, that's fair. Sure. So yeah, and I've got things in here like Galvanic Relay that'll fill my hand, and silly Flame Rift that'll damage everybody. Like just crazy ways that cost cheap to damage the board, get life totals down, get cards in my hand, and let's boogie. That's what I'm talking about.
I love the Flame Rift plan. I think if I were
almost went with a Dragon's Approach plan, but I was like, no, that's a little too like. I don't know. It would be feasible. You could absolutely do it.
It's a little too cute. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if I was building this deck, I would have not used any of the Kiln Fiend and company guys, and I would have not used Flame Rift. I would have just gone all in on commander damage.
Yeah,
and
I thought about. I was torn when I started typing this list up. I think I landed on this because of my 60-card Blitz addiction. But I was thinking, this could almost be like a Sailor's Bane deck where you're just all in or mostly in on your commander and everything else is spells.
I I think that is a mistake. I think your version of it with the Flame Rifts and the Kiln Fiends and the other prowess guys, just the distributed threat, I think that's going to be more effective and more fun.
Oh, more fun
So
for sure.
I was actually thinking the other direction in terms of effectiveness. I would, in my head, I'm thinking cut the uniform burn and keep the Kiln Fiends, because this commander is going to be a removal magnet, and this allows you to still make use of all your prowess stuff, even if your commander gets removed the moment before combat.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was kind of saying earlier too. They're extra removal targets. They're backup damage if you need them, if you can't flip your commander right away. And even the front side has a little bit of prowess and stuff like that. Or if it's just not on the board at all, at least you still have some damage. You're just not casting cards for free at that point or for nothing.
But on the other hand, I guess the symmetrical burn would allow you to sit back if you've been caught off guard by removal, and would allow you to recover without drawing as much ire as, still having a Kiln Fiend that gets massive every turn.
Yeah.
That cannot defend you at all.
Right.
All I'm thinking here is that I am a pal, and I am contractually obligated to never cut Flame Rift from a deck ever. It's clause 3. It's right near up the top. It's very clear.
Yeah, you signed off on it.
Flame Rift has to go in red decks. Those are the rules, and I respect and appreciate and agree with the rules. I'm here for flame rifting everyone all the time.
So yeah,
I love how all of us having different ideas about it very much goes back to the idea of these aren't the only way to build these decks.
Yeah,
that's what I'm kind of hoping for these types of episodes.
Oh, I actually completely forgot to mention something on that thing. Like when we were talking about how the Stormclaw fits into the March of Machines context, I talked about these threaten effects. Or the one threaten effect in March of Machines. You could turn that into the entire Stormclaw Rager deck if you wanted to.
Oh yeah,
if
I
you
probably
decided
will.
not right.
I mean, it didn't work for Carmella. It might work for Stormclaw Rager.
Yeah, I mean, when you have such an easy sack outlet in the command zone that draws you a card, like you could turn this into a really nasty, dedicated, I'm going to steal all of the things and then sacrifice them constantly deck.
Yeah.
So that's another direction you could take it. I think the biggest reason I didn't do that is because I already have that deck built with Yudi. So
yeah, and I think that's a little like, not I don't know what the word is. It's not unintuitive, but like if you were to draft the Rager, anyone other than maybe us three wouldn't just be like threaten tribal. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't automatically read like that. So that was probably a good call.
Yeah. So I've got something similar to what you were describing with Direfleet Warmonger at the helm. 3-drop, 3/3 at the beginning of combat on your turn. You may sacrifice another creature. If you do, Warmonger gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. So just threaten, steal something, beat face, repeat.
Done.
Yep.
But yours with Stormclaw Rager drawing you a card, it's so much more repeatable, and you're going to have better resources for replaying your commander when it gets removed because you killed someone else's commander too many times.
Right. Honestly, I think one of the biggest differences for me between these two things is with the Stormclaw Rager, you get to attack with the thing you stole and then sacrifice its second main.
Oh,
and that's
good point.
That's like a solid 60% of the fun of stealing things for me is like
hitting them with their own creatures. Yeah.
before I trash them into the garbage.
So I've been testing some Blood Boil Sorcerer shenanigans, and I've been noticing that I tend the opposite way, unless it's like specifically a political thing in the late game where someone is the arch enemy, or like I'm manipulating life totals. Unless it's something very specific like that, I tend to like, no, I want to sacrifice this thing for value instead.
I mean, Blood Boil lets you do both, right? You can,
so
if you hit the threaten, you can main phase 1 threaten, combat step attack, and then like if it gets blocked or whatever, you could choose to sacrifice it in response. But if it gets through, you sacrifice its second main.
But what I've noticed is that I usually have an idea before combat. I either want it to be blocked or I don't. Either I'm trading it and I'm not sacking it for value, or the sacrifice is what I really want, and if someone's just going to block it, then I'm going to sacrifice it anyway.
Okay.
I don't
All right.
Yeah.
like. Yes, there is an in between, but it's not usually what I want.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I went pretty. I think I literally just took a 60 card blitz list and just blew it up to 100. Like my creature package is still only 8 creatures total. The Festival Crasher, the Firebrand Archer here for the pingers, the Flame Breather, Kiln Fiend, the Cryptomancer, and then Alchemist, and then I added Sea Hag and Sword Coast Serpent. And that's it. Everything else is a freaking draw spell, a burn spell, or something of that nature, or a combat trick.
How much defensive stuff, like defend your commander from removal, do you have in the deck?
Protection, I have quite a bit. I think that's down further in the How to Not Die.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll touch on that here. Actually, yeah, Pillar 4. So speaking of the next step, Paul, you want to tell us about Pillar 3? How are you going to not run out of gas with your Azorius Knights?
So, going back to the draft archetype, we talked about this being more aggressively tilted. And whenever I was talking about the reason I wanted to build Marshal of Zhalfir, it was because I was going to build it in a dirtily mid-range direction. So, what's the core of how I'm doing that? Where am I getting my value that enables me to compete in the mid and late game? And the first little inklings of that come from a few nights, like I mentioned Liev Sky Knight earlier, where you get an ETB effect and then you still have a body. There's a fair bit of that mixed in with knights. There's a few that can trip, such as Griff Vanguard. Mm-hmm. Flying 3/2 for 5. Whenever it enters the battlefield, draw a card. There's a few like that have a cantrip when they enter the battlefield, and those will help extend your hand just a little bit.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you actually have to reach outside of Night Tribal. So there's Monarch and Initiative cards, which there is a little bit of overlap with Goliath Paladin being a 5-drop 3/6 with Vigilance, and it's a Knight, so you end up with a 4/7 Vigilance, but you also get Initiative when it ETBs. And whenever you have a 4/7 that's attacking every turn, it's pretty easy to both take and keep the initiative. Like, that's where the defensive side of this deck really starts to show its chops, is when Monarch and Initiative are on the field and you're the only one benefiting from them.
Oh, sure.
We all know how the Pals and Alk usually view Monarch and the Initiative. It gets passed around like crazy, and what I've seen so far testing this deck is it does not like to share. So these become massive card advantage engines for this deck. And then
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
Confused Unga Bunga.
It's okay. Alk, I've got something for you. So, going back to attacking, there's even more card advantage. Because I've mixed in a few, like, Stealer of Secrets types effect. That one's not in here because its butt is small. But I've got Scroll Thief. That's a 1/3 whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Mm-hmm. And there's a few others. Soul Knife Spy. It's a 3/2 for 3. Whenever it deals damage to a player, draw a card. So these aren't knights. They aren't directly related to the Anthem part of the commander. And what I noticed whenever I was paring down my deck was a lot of the knight cards were getting cut because they didn't do anything but be a big body.
Sure.
So I've actually cut the knights down to like the low 20s, if I remember correctly, in the deck. And instead there's a lot more card advantage because what I'm focusing instead on is the commander's ability to tap down defenders, which lets me get these combat triggers more consistently. So if I play a 3-drop creature and I'm attacking with it and I get 2 draws off of it because I was able to tap down defenders and then it dies, that's a divination that also dealt damage to someone's face.
That sounds good.
So, like, they aren't always useful. You can't always get them through, but it doesn't take much to make them still real, even though they're not directly Knight tribal.
Right.
See, drawing cards
ETBs,
by attacking
Monarch Initiative, combat.
This I understand.
Yeah.
I'm
You're
once
speaking
again
his
with
language.
Yeah.
And just kind of, we touched the bit that wasn't Knight Tribal, and now getting back more in a thematic way. The other thing I did was I included a fair bit of equipment, and that includes some great things like Goggles of Night.
Yeah.
Love
So So I can turn anything into a scroll thief.
Right.
What would knights be without their, shiny toys and swords?
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
And then that also gives you like Trailblazer's Torch, the equipment ETB initiative. So yeah, I got some fun toys for the knights to play with.
I like the direction you went to. I know you kind of already explained it, but like you weren't just like, well, knight tribal, I need 47 creatures that say that they're a knight. Like you went with some, like you were just talking about, some value creatures, ETB creatures, combat damage, value, that sort of thing. And then the knights that you did add are actually really good, like Double Strike, and the new knight from Mom, the new Coalition knight, brings an extra 2/2 with vigilance to the battlefield, and Knighted Mirror gets Double Strike. Like these are really good creatures on their own, and they just happen to be knights. Like I like what your knight package is actually very powerful. It's not just because it's knights, I'm going to fill my deck with knights. Like you picked very specifically very good knights, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like, in a sense, trying to build Knight Tribal mid-range where you go hard on the knights with this commander, right now with the knights we have available, it's a bit of a trap. I think if you go full Knight Tribal, you need to be a more aggressive deck. You need to cut out a lot of the card draw in order to make room.
Oh, sure. But I also think that's where a lot of these under-supported tribes at common or uncommon seem to fail in PDH, like Soldier Tribal or Knights Tribals, because people are just like, oh, it's a Lord for Knights. Let me play 52 Knights. I don't know why the number keeps getting bigger, but let me play a bunch of Knights and my deck will be good, and then it's terrible, and they're like, I don't know what went wrong. I'm never playing this again. So I think you had a very interesting, a very good approach with this deck.
And for someone that isn't listening to this episode and looking at the deck list, I feel like that could make it difficult to evaluate this deck because it seems like just kind of some good stuff thrown together.
Because they would open the link and expect 62 knights, and there's just not. So, but yeah, it's very good explanation, good deck. I like it.
You got a link to this episode in the primer.
That's actually a fantastic idea.
That is the smartest thing that's ever been said on this show.
This is why they call me Dave the Ideas Guy.
Oh, and then I can never change the deck list again.
Well,
there is that.
You have to keep very careful track of which cards you've mentioned by name in this show, and never change those ones. But like you could change the other cards.
Yeah, I got to learn to use that custom tagger feature that you make such good use of.
The custom tagging is a huge part of Moxfield. I love it.
Yep.
All right, Dave. I know it's like kind of printed on your commander, but how do you not run out of gas?
So there's one big principle here that guides my decision making, and that is Storm Rager gonna Storm Rage. That's
sage advice.
That's how you not run out of gas.
Yeah.
You do the thing that your commander says to do, and then the cards just multiply in your hand.
They just appear. They just materialize from nowhere. Yeah, I like that.
You play one Chromatic Star, and then there are two cards. It's like the Hydra, right? You cut off one head. Yeah. You play one star, and two cards replace it.
Yeah. You play a Ichor Wellspring, and all of a sudden there's 4 cards.
3 cards replace
3
that
cards.
One. Ichor Wellspring is nuts.
Nuts. Yeah. That makes sense.
This thing just multiplies frantic.
Yeah.
Like,
wait, so you're just making sure you're not playing blue?
No. I'm playing so there's one color combination that, in my experience, better at drawing cards than blue, and that's Rakdos.
And here we are.
Yeah, I mean, so like my favorite Rakdos deck is Azra Oddsmaker, and it is a Berserkir aggro deck that is just consistently discarding to hand size because it draws so much so consistently. Like this is a deck that's just packed with 2-mana threats. And I'll be on turn 6, making my land drop, playing 3 cards from my hand, none of which draw me cards, and I'll still discard the hand size at the end of that turn because I've drawn too much from the Oddsmaker. I'm worried that the Stormclaw Rager is going to be the same. I'm worried that you're going to, you're going to play the Ichor Wellspring and you're going to play the Chromatic Star and you're going to crack them to put counters on and you'll be like, oh, I have 8 cards in my hand.
Oh, wait, what happened?
Whoops. My math's bad. I guess I'm gonna discard the hand size now. I'll discard
I can see that being
Whisper.
a concern. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, my commander's kind of the same. It's sort of not as clearly spelled out on the card as yours is, but mine wants you to play a lot of spells as fast as you can. But in order to do that, you'll run out of cards in like 2 turns. So you got to keep your hand full. And basically, I'm just using things like Behold the Multiverse, Galvanic Relay, any of the 23 draw spells that are in the deck. I was kind of like you, where you were like, oh, the Sleeper Dart and the wedding announcement or wedding invitation. I was kind of like that. Like, I picked Crimson Wisps just to draw a card. I have Expedite in here just to draw a card. Like, sure, I could hit Kiln Fiend with an Expedite, maybe give it haste or whatever, or draw a card, but it's mostly in there because it says draw a card. I could be talked into like Warlord's Fury or Crash Through, things like that are just super cheap, draw me a card. And I don't know if you've ever seen a Firebrand Archer with Ophidian Eye on it. But that gets real good at filling your hand real fast.
For some reason, what I always run into instead of the Ophidian Eye, it's the Sigil of Sleep.
Oh, the Sigil too. That's a good one. I hadn't thought about
gross.
that. That is gross. And then there's Tandem Lookout. I could be talked into that as well. Sort of does the same thing. I could see this deck. Ophidian Eye coupled with like Galvanic Relay and all that, I could definitely see the discard to hand size problem happening here as well. So after that, it's just one of the things I struggle with most playing Blitz decks is my mana itself. Not that I don't have enough, it's that sometimes I tap the wrong mana because I don't know what I'm drawing next, if that makes sense. Like it just always works out that way, where I'll tap my mountains for something and then I'll draw a red card, or I'll tap my islands for something and I'll rip a blue card off the top and I can't cast it. So I don't know if that's just inherent to this sort of strategy or archetype, but I always find myself with that problem. So I did add a few mana rocks to help out, kind of smooth that a little bit, but I'm not expecting the blatant problems like that in this deck, because it should be a little more smoothed out at this level, in this format particularly. But yeah, I'm just drawing a bunch of cards, like trying to draw as many as possible and trigger the commander as many times as possible and all my other creatures, and we'll just go from there. Hope for the best.
The storm and which mana you tap idea is interesting, especially since you're being more aggressive, so it is a little harder to incorporate like the tap lands that can give you either color.
Right.
Because you don't want to suffer that tempo loss as much at the beginning.
Yeah, and the deck like this really, really does suffer from tap lands. I mean, I have them in here just because I think you kind of have to, to a certain amount, but they can hurt for sure. Like, I have 35 lands, like we talked about earlier. 29 of them are just basic untapped lands. Well, I guess in Takasha's Dig Site. I have some fetch lands and some tap lands, but, I toyed with the idea of a Gates package, but then I thought, well, that's sure, if it gets to go off, that's adding a handful of power, but how much tempo did I lose because 3 turns in a row I played a tap land? So, yep. But yeah.
Speaking of Gates, is Rager running Gates?
Yes. There's a gate that makes treasures.
Okay.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
There's a gate that makes treasures, and there's a gate that makes your Voltron commander bigger. Like, right. The persecution rests, Your Honor.
And I know that, like, we talked about it earlier, my total mana value of this deck is super low, but I still put in Tavern Brawler just because it's an extra card every turn and a little bit of damage. I just wanted all the cards that drew me cards.
I'd still have trouble remembering to go look at the common backgrounds. Like, I don't think the Double Strike one works real well with Marshall, just because it's fairly small, but it definitely feels like it should always be considered every time I have a white deck.
And what's the totally blanking on it? There's a blue instant combat trick. Target creature gets shadow.
Are you talking about the one with flashback?
Yes. I used to run it in my 60-card Blitz deck.
I think it's Rebound, not Flashback.
Shadow Rift. For a single blue, target creature gains shadow until the end of turn. Draw a card. I just now remembered it, but that's probably going in the deck because it's very versatile. But that's probably going in the deck now since I just remembered it. So kind of like Dave with his artifacts. I don't care what the effect is. I just want to draw a freaking card, man. Put it in my hand. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what cantrip evasion Tireless Tribe used in Pauper. I want to say it was Shadow Rift, but
Oh, yeah, it might have been Shadow Rift back then. Mm-hmm. And see, like, I didn't put Gush in this deck because I don't want to lose the islands.
Yep.
So,
not to mention being 2-color, it can actually be surprisingly hard to have 2
That's
islands,
true.
Especially if you're running like tap lands that aren't
that
islands.
aren't typed, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, other than that, I'm just trying to draw cards, man. Earlier I was talking about like getting in damage and stuff, team or battle rage, all that sort of thing. I also have like Soul's Fire in here. So if my commander gets to 16 power or whatever, I can just smash somebody with him and he doesn't die. It's not like a fling or whatever. So that's always helpful too.
I do wish we had more flings and deal damage to player equal to power.
I do too. I searched for so long. Soulfire is just good. There are a handful that do it, but it does it to target creature, not to any target or player or whatever. Anywho, I think our pillar 3 or this category here is pretty straightforward. What do you got, Scarecrow, for the last pillar? How are you going to stay alive? Or more specifically, how are you going to not die?
So kind of splitting this up, how am I personally not going to die, and then how are my creatures not going to die?
There you go.
So I've already kind of touched on how am I not going to die. Vigilance, lifelink, tapping down things that might attack me. One kind of nuance of this ability for someone that hasn't dealt with it before, one thing you can do is you can wait until your opponent's first main phase. And when they start to go to combat with something scary, you tap it down then. And now it is not available to attack or to block. So with good timing, you can open them up to other players attacking them and open them up to you attacking them, while also being defensive. Mm-hmm. So that is a really powerful tool for this deck to have, and you may do that like once, twice a game, getting that perfect thing, but when you do it, it can be a pretty big tempo swing, especially if you're tapping down a combat focused commander, where you're just
right.
Like for this turn you don't get to do your thing. Like in a practice game with the Knight deck, I was using it on Null Warband, the Myriad mono red 5/5 with Menace.
That's just rude.
That is, a little bit.
You don't get to attack.
Rude and awesome.
And I'm going to hit you in the face next turn too.
Right.
So that's one of the ways that I stay alive, on top of big butts with vigilance and lifelink. So there's just a lot of different elements coming together, and you won't even have all those elements every game, but you'll have enough to stop a lot of damage every game. And then on top of that, there's also like a political element, like, hey, I'm going to tap down your commander. It's scary unless it's attacking someone else.
If it's not coming at me, you can have it.
Yeah, which 2 mana doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're using it every turn, paying for Marshall's tap down ability can actually slow your tempo quite a bit. So using politics to make sure you don't have to tap things down can be really beneficial for your tempo as well.
Yeah, and I think Azorius, especially Knights, is just perfect for that.
Yeah. And then, so moving away from keeping my creatures alive, moving away from keeping me alive, how do I keep my creatures alive? So something that can be kind of hard to see when you first look at this commander is it's a tribe that has a fair number of 2-butts in it. And sure, you're pumping those up, but then if someone drops a fiery candidate,
right?
Sure, your other knights that have the anthem on them are big enough to survive. But if your commander dies because he's a 2-butt, then everything loses the anthem, and then maybe some of your other knights die. So there is some vulnerability to this cascade of dying. So, going back to my equipment sub-theme, a lot of those give vigilance and a buff. Like the new equipment that came with this set, Core Halberd.
Oh,
one-drop
so good.
That,
I love that one so much.
Yeah, that gives +1/+1 in vigilance. So I'll equip that to my commander. I'll attack with it. Before blockers, I'll tap down something annoying that would block. I'll get a bunch of damage through. And my commander now is a 3-butt, so it won't die to small board wipes.
Mm-hmm.
And those also help keep some of my other, like, a little more fragile creatures alive through hairy combats. So, and the other upside there is there's a lot of flexibility in terms of I have Trinket Mage, which can go get some of those equipments, or removal. So just more ways to be flexible about stopping the very biggest problems I have. Like, this deck doesn't pack a ton of removal, but what it does have is flexibility because of the flexibility in the tap down ability combined with a few tutor packages that can give me the right removal at the right time.
Sure.
And that's all I've got.
No, that sounds good. I like the look of the deck. Oh, Dave. What do you got?
What does
Are you going to
the
not die?
red-black deck have in the control category? Weirdly, almost nothing.
Wow.
There's a couple cards that will kill something and give me an artifact. Like the new, it used to be called Grim Bounty when it was a sorcery, but now it's an instant and it's called Deadly Derision. That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, I'm kind of not worried about it. Like my plan for permanent removal is player removal. Turns out, I don't know if you guys knew about this, but if you deal 16 damage to a player from one commander, all their creatures die.
Yeah, their whole deck dies. Like
Their
everything
whole
dies.
deck. Yeah. You destroy all their creatures, destroy all their lands,
Yeah.
destroy their hand. It's powerful control magic that we're doing here. So that's my plan. I am a little worried about things getting blocked. For that, we are going to run a Pestilence.
I think
Pestilence is really good because, like, if your deck is working, you probably have a 6/6 at least commander.
Sure.
And it shouldn't be hard to keep Pestilence around for when you need it. I really like Swirling Sandstorm in this deck. Swirling Sandstorm is a 4-mana red sorcery that if you don't have Threshold, if you don't have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it does nothing.
Yeah, stone, nothing.
Just pure dead card. Accomplishes nothing, no text, no effect. If you have Threshold, this 4-mana red sorcery common will deal 5 damage to each creature without flying.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, I love this card in theory. I think that in practice, it is a lot more clumsy and a lot more awkward than it looks. Like, it's a removal
really
spell that
really
gets
is.
blanked by a Relic of Progenitus, which is not what you want out of your removal spells. It's going to be hard to find a commander that can survive it. I mean, flyers work, but like red doesn't have a ton of those. So there's a lot that can go wrong with this commander or with this removal spell. I think that this is the deck for it. I think that you're going to be consistently, your commander's going to be a 6-butt or bigger, so you don't have to worry about killing your own guy with it. I think that you're going to be just yeeting stuff into the graveyard so constantly that I think that
consistently, yeah. Mm-hmm.
having Threshold and maintaining it is not going to be a problem. And I think this is going to clear out a lot of little 1-butts or even little 4-butts. It's going to get those pesky little 4-butts out of your way so you can swing in with your 6/6 or your 7/7 or your 10/10, however big your Storm Rager is.
Right.
So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, let's move to the last deck here. The Spell Spear. Well, again, it's a Blitz deck, so typically the only way Blitz decks do not die is that they just have to go faster than the opponents. In order to do that, Spell Spear itself has to stay alive on the battlefield for as long as possible. So that means I'm going to have to pull out cards like Cloud of the Dominus to give it some Shroud, which I don't really want to do a whole lot of because I also want to be targeting the Spell Spear with some combat tricks.
Shroud stops the Assault Strobe. You don't want that.
Yeah, exactly. So I put that in there. I don't know if it's good or not. I mean, it's a good card. I don't know if it's good in this deck, but I just love the Dominus, so it's in there. It's 1 mana. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The big old kiln fiend or what have you. Cryptomancer's in here to keep it alive, give it some hexproof if it's being targeted. And then outside of that, honestly, it's just as much counter magic as I can fit in. OG Counterspell, Arcane Denial, Confound. If you need to get rid of a key blocker, I put in Sapphire Charm, that sort of thing. Normally with a blue X commander, any sort of blue commander, I almost first thing just slam dunk a Flicker package into the deck to protect them, get extra ETBs, maybe get some +1/+1 counters, that sort of thing. But Spell Spear does not like being flickered because it's going to come back on the front side. And while it does have the prowess and the trample or what have you, it is at a much less aggressive rate, so it's going to take you longer to kill with the front side of the commander. So that's it. A little bit of hexproof, just a pinch of Shroud, a bunch of counter spells and then just go as fast as you can. That's it. I don't expect to win a lot of games with this deck, but I expect to kill a lot of individual players with it because it will, like you said, Dave, a rebounded distortion strike plus an assault strobe that's lethal, and that could be on like turn 5 or something. That's crazy.
That's just monstrous.
That is monstrous. Like you just don't like. It's one of those things where oh, what are you playing? Oh, okay, it's prowess, whatever, trample. Okay, cool. And then all of a sudden you're dead, and you're like, I don't know what happened. I'm dead. He cast 2 spells, and I'm dead. I don't know.
If I remember correctly, there was someone talking, I don't remember if it was on Reddit or Twitter, about just doing a turn 1 or 2 kill with Spell Spear without even transforming it.
Really?
Yeah. It was, the usual culprits of, like, I have Simeon...
okay. Lotus Petal, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, you've got some rituals, but then it's like the last ritual, like the last Lotus Petal or something, also triggers your prowess for the first time, and then you have a double strike spell.
Yeah. And see what you bring up the rituals. That was another thing I was sort of on the fence about, because I use as many of them as I can in my Iconoclast deck because it just makes more creatures. It triggers the pingers more often, but I wasn't sure I totally wanted them in this deck.
Yeah,
I guess I could be talked into it, but...
Iconoclast plays a lot more card-positive draw spells.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it. That's how I propose to not die first, at least. So what do you think? You guys gonna play your decks? You gonna love it? You gonna work on it for a while? Or
yeah, I seem to be accumulating a lot of these dirtily mid-range decks recently between like this and... Wingmantle Chaplain and 1 or 2 others. So I need to like really get down to brass tacks and figure out which one of them I like best. And honestly, this one feels really good. Like it makes itself arch enemy less than Wingmantle Chaplain. So it feels more flexible. Wingmantle Chaplain gets itself painted into a corner by making too many birds, and people don't like that.
Right. That was powerful though. I faced it. It was powerful. There was
Look,
a lot
everyone,
of birds.
I have birds. Attack me.
I like the Chaplain.
And a good thing too about blitz decks is you don't really have to be like you're just going so fast and so linear. You don't have to really be like political, and you don't have to like worry about so many things. It's definitely not a brain dead type of deck. It's not anything like that. It's just every card does what it's supposed to do, and your commander does what it's supposed to do, and that's it. There's not a ton of decision trees. Maybe, sure, you have to figure out which combat trick is going to hit which creature and yada, 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 but it's not like this super big, mind puzzle of a deck, and it's fun. These decks are a blast to play. I don't know if are you a big Blitz player, Dave? Do you play typically like Spellslinger type decks?
So I did a long time ago.
I know you have like the League Mage or Guild Mage or whatever, but...
That's a token. That's like a go wide deck. It's actually very slow and clumsy. A million years ago, I had a Spellheart Chimera deck, which was this was before Crackling Drake existed, and I liked the idea of it in theory. I liked the idea of this was my whoops all spells deck. It had 0 creatures, 0 artifacts, 0 enchantments. It was literally just lands and instants and sorceries.
Amazing.
And it still did really well, shockingly well. And I really, really disliked the play pattern because it basically didn't participate at all in the game for the first 5 turns.
Right.
And then killed a guy.
Yeah.
And if I was lucky, it killed another guy and then a third, and I won. And if I wasn't lucky, someone killed me or killed my commander enough times that I couldn't do anything. And that guy I killed on turn 6 just had to sit there and watch the rest of our 30 minute,
hour
45
match. Yeah.
And I decided I just really, really disliked the play patterns. I liked the idea of building this Whoops All Spells deck. I didn't like how it played, so I took that apart.
Yeah, that's very true. And like I said earlier, if I wanted to go play in a Pauper tournament, but I didn't really feel like playing, I just wanted to hang out, I would play Blitz because the games are over in 15 minutes. Like the match, all 3 games are over in 15 minutes.
As a 1v1 strategy, I love it. I also built the Slaughtermaster, a million years ago, and that one is still together. That one is theoretically it's super fun in a 1v1 setting. I dislike it for all the same reasons in multiplayer, and I don't really play it anymore.
So this may be the
But
kind of commander that shows up, the spell spear that shows up in a 1v1 or
I think it could, yeah.
PDC or whatever.
This thing feels like it has 1v1 potential.
Sure.
I feel like we just need a pod of Dargo Rogrock and Spell Spear and Slaughtermaster. And who's your fourth?
Golly.
Illuminator Virtuoso.
Mileva.
Oh, Maliva, yeah.
Get some white in there.
10th
Oh, there
District
you go.
Legionnaire. Yeah.
And now you have all 5 colors.
Yeah. I was thinking the Illuminator Virtuoso is the mono white version of the Slaughtermaster.
Mono White Blitz, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to ask you guys before we ran out of time. Honestly, this deck I sort of just threw it together. I didn't do like this huge like dive on it or anything, but the thing that kept sticking out to me is how to. I guess it wouldn't be a huge deal, but I'm worried about affording that transform cost while still playing spells. Is that a concern, or am I just overthinking it?
I kept looking at it like the turn I transform, I'm not doing much except holding up a counter spell.
It's gonna that's how it's gonna have to be, right?
Yeah.
There's not really a way to cheat that or make sure.
At least the first time. I think if your commander gets removed and replayed, you'll have enough mana to do something
the next time.
Yeah.
The second time you should have enough mana for, transform it plus
A spell or two. Okay.
Reckless Charge. Swing for what? 9? Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Casual.
NBD.
Fine.
Yeah, just casual. Cool. Yeah.
Whenever there's one of these decks that kills one person really fast, like it's not necessarily something I would want to play all the time either, but I do really, really enjoy the analysis aspect of if I'm trying to be competitive, whose deck is the hardest counter to mine, therefore I should kill them first as hard as possible. Like just the intellectual side of that thought process I enjoy.
Yeah. I am, well, I think as Scarecrow has seen in a pod most recently, I am not great with threat assessment, but yes, I I absolutely agree with that mindset.
To be fair, both of those games were, it took me a minute to wrap my head around them too.
Yeah, they were wild.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's our decks. I hope the listeners like them. I hope they get a little inspiration from them. If you crack some of these sweet commanders, or if you decide to build a PDH deck around one of the other archetypes, one of the other Signpost uncommons, let us know. Post it somewhere. Hit us up on Twitter or the home base or even the PDH Pod Discord, whatever. Show us what kind of deck you're going to build, because there's some sweet ones. It's not like we sifted through these and we said, they all kind of suck and these are the 3 best. Like, no, I think each one of them is very playable. The blue-black one's sweet, the green-white one's sweet, all that sort of stuff. So I want to see what decks come out of this set. What do you think? You want to get to a question?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about these decks for a while.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about something else real quick and then go do something else.
Go do non-podcast stuff.
Yeah, I can hear my wife chopping up stuff in the kitchen.
That's
Hopefully
code for bathroom stuff.
Right. Bladder stuff. All right.
Non-podcast stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to this listener question. I know it's been quite a while since we've had one, and we'll try to keep it short. But at Mick DeBow asks, or says, PDH changed life total rules to 30 and 16, while dual PDH changed it to 20/20 or 25/21. Do you know why this is, and what are your thoughts on it? I know, Paul, you had some either the reason or some thoughts on it. What do you got?
Yeah, so I can give you all the short version, but for the long version, I actually wrote out a short article whenever the Pauper Dual Commander Committee first was announcing its existence, and they were first puzzling through what do we want our initial rule set to look like. So the short version was you can kind of just look at 2 commanders for examples of why this happened. Most groups started with 3016 just because they were running in parallel with Pauper Commander.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Okay, that's the default assumption. So, what caused problems first? Well, 16 commander damage is really, really achievable with something like Slippery Bogle.
Yeah, it sure is.
It gets to 20 in 1v1 Pauper, 60 card Pauper, incredibly fast.
Yeah.
So 16, even easier. So that's what necessitated
16, and you can't gain life.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
That's what necessitated changing commander damage to 21. So what was the problem that caused issues with 30? Well, if I remember correctly, it was Baleful Strix was too good at defense. So they needed to bring they needed to bring your regular life total down.
So it's almost like the opposite of commander damage. Like commander damage was too easy to achieve, but 30 life was too hard to whittle him down.
Right. So Baleful Strix was really dominant in, I think it was Brazil, until they brought life total down. But if they brought life total all the way down to 20, then some very aggressive go-wide commanders, such as Loyal Apprentice, were going to be absolutely dominant.
Sure.
And some of those aggro commanders still are very powerful at 25 and are concerning, but it's still better than it was at 20.
Yeah,
so
it's a nice little
you kind
cushion.
of had all these problem cases that were kind of pushing towards this center solution of 25-21.
Is that what you got, Dave? Pretty much just a good balance.
yeah, I was going to go into a lot less detail. I was just going to say, like, a lot of people who have played this game a lot, just exhaustively, have found that these are the numbers that create the best balance between aggro and control and combo. The lowered life totals give aggro a chance, but still allow, a very good control combo deck to come out of it in the end. And the difference between multiplayer dynamics and 1v1 dynamics mean that, for one setting it's 30-16 and the other it's 21-25. And just that's where it works the best. That's the sweet spot for right now. But it is something that, I play a lot of games that are 40-21 because I really enjoy stupid, grindy, long games of Magic.
Yeah, sure.
Sheldon asked me a couple weeks ago why he should respect the rules committee, and I said he shouldn't. If you have a better way to play PDH than what we got on our website, play PDH that way. And
bring it
I
on.
stand by that.
Absolutely.
Like, if you are a pal, you want to go 40-21, do it.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of the people playing exhaustively, like the Pauper Dual Commander committee getting together was not the beginning of them playing either. There had been people playing for
a while, yeah.
As a concerted effort, like, a year and a half at least before that, like, with this specific effort of trying to figure out what life totals needed to be used. And then before that, like, back in the beginning of PDH's history, there was a lot of, like, oh, I can't get a full playgroup together, so I guess we're playing 1v1. So there is a lot of history and some people that have been playing years and years and years of 1v1. And it's not like this rule set was just made on a whim by someone in a month. And just also for clarity, I may have written the article explaining some of the reasoning, but I had no hand in picking out the life totals. So It's not like I'm promoting my own opinion.
No, you're good. I think you had a very good explanation. So I wasn't sure either, so that was a good question.
Yeah, good question.
All right. I think we're going to move on into the outro here.
Other stuff is calling. So, yeah.
Yeah, other stuff is definitely knocking on the door. All right. A few more things before we wrap it up for a week. If you need more Pauper Commander talk or have any questions about the format, you can always email the show at thepdhpod@gmail.com. Head on over to the PDH Homebase's website. That'll take you right to their Discord server. Normally, well, I guess Liam is still on Twitter, so you can find him at Pauper Command. You can find me at Pauper_B, and you can find Dave as Alcadron just about anywhere else PDH is being talked about. Mr. Scarecrow, where can the listeners find you?
Pretty much everywhere on the internet. I am Scarecrow1779.
Perfect. Easy enough. Yeah, I'll put all the links to all that stuff down into the down to the show details. You can just click on them and find them just about anywhere. And yeah, that brings episode 44 of the PDH Pod to a close, but we want to give a big thanks to MTG Brad for letting us use their original music for the show, and from everyone in here to everyone out there, draft those signposts, brew a deck, and we'll see you in about a week. Peace.
Cheers.
Bye forever.
I brought Pauper Dex to the party. Pauper. I brought Pauper Dex to the party.